Hello guys and welcome. It's Engineering Rebel, and I'm sure you guys remember sometime back I made a video about turbos. Now in this video, I'm going to talk about the other type of forced induction, superchargers. Now this video will be broken up into three parts: the types of superchargers, how they work and what they do, as well as the pros and cons of having one. I'm also going to keep this video very simple. So let's get started. Now before I jump into the video, I just want to quickly explain the difference between a turbo and a supercharger. Now, a turbo would use the exhaust gases to spin a propeller, therefore forcing air into the engine. But a supercharger would use a belt hooked up to the crankshaft pulley that would spin a propeller that would force air into the engine. So something to keep in mind is that a turbo would use an exhaust gas to spin a propeller, but a supercharger would use a belt hooked up directly to a crankshaft pulley. So there are two types of superchargers: a root supercharger and a twin screw supercharger. So starting with the twin screw, the air would come in through an inlet and then it would get compressed by these two rotors, one being a male side and another one being a female side. So as the air gets compressed, it becomes more dense. So the more dense the air, the better the combustion. Now, a root supercharger again has two rotors, as all superchargers do, except as the air comes in through the inlet, it moves around the sides rather than through the middle. So this means the air does not get compressed. And then as the air goes around it, it would then come out through this side and then into an intake manifold. So that being said, all superchargers work similarly, except the flow of air is different. While some it goes right through the rotors, some it has to go around it and then out through the discharger's side. Now I'm going to talk about how they work, what they do, as well as some of the parts. So starting with the parts, we got the drive pulley, and this is what would be hooked up to your crankshaft pulley and would spin this rotor. Now the phasing gear would be hooked up to this other gear spinning this other rotor. Now keep in mind, this is a root supercharger, so the air would travel throughout the sides and not through the middle. And then these are your rotors, this is your air inlet, and this is the actuator known as the bypass valve, and this is what would control your airflow. And then this is where the air would come out through. So you would have your air come in through here, and as the rotors spin, the air would come through the sides and then out through here into an intake manifold, so jamming more air into the engine, giving you more power. Now a twin screw supercharger would work similarly, except the air would go right through the middle instead of around the sides, therefore compressing it. Now I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of a supercharger. Now if you've seen my turbo video, some of these might be similar. Now obviously if you supercharge your car, it will make more power. So the more air, the better the combustion, the more power your engine will make. Now another pro of a supercharger is that there is no lag. Because it's hooked up to the crankshaft pulley, it does not need to be spooled up like a turbo using the exhaust gas, and therefore you would have power on demand, unlike a turbo where it needs to spool up. Now that brings me on to the next pro: low RPM boost, which means you don't need to be in high RPMs like a turbo for it to spool up the turbine to jam air into your intake manifold. A supercharger, again, because it's hooked up to your crankshaft pulley, regardless of RPM, it will always create boost. And finally, the price of superchargers are relatively affordable, making them very user-friendly to people who like to modify their cars and like to get more power out of them. Now, next are the cons. Now, I mentioned in my turbo video that when you put forced induction on your car, it's going to wear out your engine, like the head gaskets and other components. Well, same with the supercharger. You supercharge your car, you're jamming all that air into your engine, the head gasket is more likely to go. Other parts like connecting rods, piston rings, all those parts are going to have pressure on them and are likely to fail much faster. And the other thing about superchargers are that they're less efficient, that your gas mileage is going to be worse, the engine is obviously going to burn more fuel because you're jamming all that air in. The engine is going to use more power, therefore using more fuel, so your fuel economy is going to be poor, and it's just not going to be very efficient if that's what you're after. But regardless of whether you are a supercharger person or a turbocharger person, it is a great way of adding more power to your engine, but always remember it does come at a cost of reliability and efficiency. So that'll wrap it up for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. More videos like this are to come in the future, and I will see you guys in the next one.